Hi, I'm Meehan with Medpricer, here today with Joe Walsh, founder of Supply Chain Sherpas. We're talking a little bit about purchase services spend management. Joe, one thing that we see is that CFOs and the C-suite continues to focus on finding revenue improvements. That's really been the theme for the last 10 to 15 years is revenue cycle and revenue improvement. Despite the fact that we're seeing declining reimbursements and they're only able to grab, minor incremental amounts of revenue growth. Should executive focus be elsewhere? Should we be turning back to cost management and focusing a little more there? What's your thought based on what you see out there in the industry?
First of all, I want to make sure I address it head on. I think depending on what conference you go to and who you talk to and the context in which you catch them, revenue might appear to be the only thing they're focused on. But if you were to talk to a CFO and really dive into what are they focused on, they're trying to pull on every lever they have available to them. Some days it's revenue, and it's very intensely revenue. Other days it's cost, and it's all dimensions of cost. Could be value-based purchasing in another conversation, and clinical outcomes because the reimbursement's tied to clinical outcomes. It could be, patient safety another day. So it could be something reputationally they're dealing with the next day and the credibility of the organization. So I think the C-level executives in most hospitals are trying to manage all of those levers simultaneously. But as like any organization goes, right, the revenue is the future of the organization and the health of the organization, and it'd be impossible to kind of think about the future without it. There's this whole concept of no margin, no mission. And that's what makes the revenue so powerful, is without it, these folks deeply believe that their mission can't be served. They're not trying to put it in the bank, they're trying to make sure it is there for the future to be able to serve their communities. So I can understand why they have a deep commitment to make sure that they preserve their future to be able to serve the communities that they're so committed to. Are they overcommitted to revenue? I don't know if they're overcommitted to revenue. I wouldn't go that far, because most CFOs that I've talked to, when they see this equation, this kind of document that I've been circulating, that it might take 20 to 30 times the revenue dollars to have the same impact as $1 in cost savings, they're finance people. They get it, right? That light comes on right away. I don't think that they don't inherently get that. You'd have to do, I don't know how many MRIs, I haven't done the math on that, I probably should, to actually figure out what it takes to save $1 on the saving side of the equation. So I think they actually get that math, which is why supply chain isn't being asked to focus on charge capture. There is no charge capture initiative in supply chain, which tells me CFOs are basically dividing up their initiatives. And they're saying revenue cycle, you focus on revenue. Supply chain, you focus on cost. The clinicians and the CMO and CNO, you focus on improving the quality of our offerings. What's kind of interesting is if we looked at things more holistically, I think that's the challenge, is the silo mentality. If we allowed ourselves to kind of look at things without those silos and to say, supply chain, what could you do? Then I don't think supply chain would say we can only affect cost savings. I think supply chain would come back and say, we could probably help you with quality, we could help you with service improvements, we could help you with innovation, we could help you with revenue, and all these other things that probably matter to you. And I bet you our clinicians could say the same thing, and I even bet that the revenue cycle could do the same thing. And I think that's the inherent limiting belief, is the silo mentality, sometimes divide and conquer, is the limiting belief. Maybe CFOs, my invitation to them would be, stop dividing and conquering, maybe a little bit more of put the big problem statement on the table and empower your folks to come up with solutions. You might be surprised what they come up with, including supply chain.
Right, and I think we've talked a lot today about purchase services and how purchase services is an area. You described it as the fruit on the ground. You don't have to get up in the branches and grab it. A lot of what you just said applies specifically to purchase services. There's savings opportunities, there's service level improvements, things that directly affect the quality of care that's going to patients. As somebody in supply chain looking to get my arms around purchase services and implement a scalable strategy to really attack that group of spend, what are some things that I should do or should look to do to make that happen?
Yeah, I think the first thing is making sure you understand the spend itself. Even redefine what it is if you haven't defined what purchase services really represents. And then once you redefine what it is, Do the full spend analysis to understand what that whole thing looks like. I don't care how deep you have to go in the data, don't skip that step, get the insights that you need. There's even third parties that actually really do a great job of, I think, bringing insights to the table to really help you understand what's possible in those areas. So dare I say, benchmarking is valuable to understand what's possible in those areas. Maybe even consider, instead of purchase services, the broader indirect area. And set reasonable expectations. In most organizations, it's mindset. It's expecting the same value contribution from indirect that you expect from everything else in supply chain combined. At Intermountain, about 50% of the value came from indirect, and about 50% of the value contribution came from all the other categories combined. I mean, again, pause and think about that. 50-50. And so for organizations that have yet to invest in purchase services or indirect, they're missing an entire opportunity. So if they're kind of walking into it, they're not maximizing the potential. And that's, I would say, the other guiding principle is run, don't walk. Don't dip your toe in the water, see the maximum potential, and then just jump in and go after it. There's already enough case studies in the industry to really go after it completely with full throttle. So that's kind of what I would do. And then in terms of order of things, there's like the sequence. Get the executive support first. Once you've got the executive support through a business case, using spend analytics to get that business case built, then you can focus on getting the right resources, the people. Then you can focus on getting the processes that you need to actually do purchase services effectively, because they are different. The process is not exactly the same as you're going to use on the clinical side of the equation. The language isn't the same. The stakeholders aren't the same. Then you got to get the right governance structure in place. And again, that governance structure, how you make decisions, wildly different. You wouldn't use value analysis in purchase services the same way that you use it on med-surg products and services. And then you've got tech-enabled, design for the future and design with the future in mind. And then these things happen pretty close to each other. You don't want to actually do everything manually and then say 5 years from now, oh, let's tech-enable it. I mean, design your process assuming it's going to be tech-enabled, but you can't tech-enable something unless you have a process. So those things have to be done in close partnership to each other, and design it right from scratch. Don't take it through 15 iterations of process development. Actually skip some steps and learn what you've done from other categories.
I think that makes sense. And at Medpricer, we've spent a lot of time building our spend analytics platform and benchmarking, and now really trying to innovate on top of that and add in things that allow hospitals to customize to their own terminology. And even things such as artificial intelligence, they're going to help them find the right opportunities to work on at the right times. How do you see systems like this beginning to be adopted, throughout providers out there as you're out coaching and working with supply chain professionals?
Yeah, more slowly than they should be. Because what's happening is it's being limited by the span of control and span of influence by supply chain functions. And also it's being limited by this belief that I need to fix PPI, and I need to fix pharmacy and med-surg before I get into purchase services. So that's unfortunate, because like we just mentioned, there's arguably more opportunity with fruit on the ground in purchase services than there is in the next round of value in PPI. And yet we still keep climbing higher in the trees in PPI. So I do think that there's tremendous value of folks who actually spend far more time in purchase services. I'm a huge believer in the indirect area just in general, and in purchase services in general, and that's where there's so much value. I'll give you one more math thing to kind of think about. In the purchase services space, every dollar that is actually saved in the organization falls straight to the bottom line of an organization. In an implant category or a PPI category, that's not how the math works. Even in pharmacy, that's not how the math works. That's the equivalent of cost of goods sold if you were a manufacturer. That's kind of like above the line stuff, where it's all my revenue minus my cost of goods sold equals, right, some margin. And then you have your operating expenses that you strip off of that to get to your profitability. This is language we don't use in healthcare because most hospitals are not for profit, so the whole income statement's kind of inverted. So it's interesting, but if you think about it that way, not every dollar saved at the top actually falls to the bottom, because cost of goods in healthcare, sometimes it's a percent of charges. So sometimes when you save more on a device or an implant, the revenue is tied to it. You get reimbursed as a percentage of how much the device costs. So you might actually lose more on the revenue side than you save on the product side. That doesn't make it the wrong decision for the hospital. These hospitals are mission driven and they're gonna make that decision all day long, but it doesn't mean that every dollar you save drops to the bottom line. It means revenue is another variable that needs to be considered. In purchase services, 100% of the spend drops to the bottom line. And that's something that is super important for us to actually contemplate. It's why folks really need to shift their attention credits more towards purchase services.